push the buzz like rush. Whatever tunes your knees to mush, they hit the lift. Even if you gotta sift through the shit to get to the twist. The smile I hide like it's your very last line. Can never get another try. Do it loud. Do it for the loud. For the here and now.
Hello, everyone. It is a cold December day here in Kansas, and I was watching an older video interview that I was involved in several years back. It was even before I started really downloading videos, and I thought it was a very good, very thorough interview. And so I contacted Beast TV, and they gave me permission to put this video on my page. So I am going to do that. I'm going to make slight adjustments in the video. I'm going to add pictures in here, but the interview was very good and pretty much all encompassing at the time of encounters that I had had. So here we go.
I have been waiting for this show. Randy is going to spill the beans tonight. And
that's right.
I cannot wait. And there's no way that we're going to be able to get through everything tonight. And so I just need to shut up and let you just go ahead and introduce Randy.
All right. Tonight's guest is Randy Arrington. He's been in the game for a while and got plenty of evidence to share with us tonight. So let's jump on in and welcome Randy. Hey, Randy.
Hey, Larry, Mark. I think we're going to have a good show tonight. We got a lot of information to go over, and there's some things I'd like to share with the people that I think they're going to find interesting when it comes to behaviors and what I think they can look for to help themselves when they're out there. So we'll just go from there.
Yes, sir. Sounds great.
Well, before we get started, Randy, I just want you to kind of tell the audience what makes you tick and how, when you got into boogering, you used that same dedication that you used with getting on the fire department.
Well, actually, it manifested itself, the behaviors of me manifested itself much earlier, back when I was in school. And it also involves when I read Roger Patterson's book. That was in my school library. But what I started exhibiting was a little bit of OCD issues in the 4th or 5th grade. And we had a reading program in our library where you could get a gold certificate if you read 50 books that year and did a book report on each one of them. So I had to have that certificate. So I started reading. I was getting to where I would read a book a day, which is, I would get to the library and check out a book and just read every extra minute I would get. I'd read it during the day. That night at home, I'd be reading it, and I'd be done with it by the time I'd get to school the next day. So I went through and got my 50, the gold certificate, and then I did it again the next year. And then 7th grade rolled around, and I was getting to where I had read every book in the library. So, I mean, I read all the presidents, every biography, and there were certain things that interested me even as a young man. But I was having to read books that I wasn't interested in. Like I went into where I was reading animal books, where the animal was the central character, and they spoke like people, like Watership Down with the rabbits and things like that. So I'm reading books like that I wasn't even interested in, but I needed to fill my quota to get that next gold certificate. And I came across Roger Patterson's book. It was in my school library.
Wow.
And that's the first time I read it. And so that's how I got introduced into this subject as a 7th grader. So isn't it interesting that that my OCD got me interested and it's carried me through. So it's just kind of amazing. But when it came to the fire department, I mean, I was 30 years old. I was putting siding on people's houses, so I was an independent contractor, and it only took me 1 year to get behind in my taxes because you're supposed to hold out your own taxes. And I really snowballed after that. And I had 2 young daughters and a young wife, And before you know it, with penalties and interest, and when I couldn't pay $7,000 in taxes one year, and then you add more to it the next year, and before you knew it, I owed the IRS $100,000.
Ooh.
And folks, I want to interject into this conversation here because I did not ever address it. I eventually did get the taxes paid back within a couple of years. I made an offer in compromise. I went through the IRS agency and a company that helped you get your taxes figured out. So I was able to come up with a compromise and paid back the taxes that I owe, or at least an offer of part of it, and got that all cleared up. At the same time that I got on the fire department, I did get all that taken care of.
I didn't have a whole lot of prospects, so there was a volunteer fire department down the street from where I lived. So I joined it specifically with the intentions of trying to get on a fire department somewhere, knowing that I needed some experience. So I became a volunteer fireman, and a position came available in a paid department one city over, and I went and applied. Made it all the way. I mean, I was a very stout physical specimen in my younger years. I was a power lifter, and that too, unbeknownst to me, was brought on by OCD, because in 10th grade I started weightlifting, and I was always a year behind everybody else. I graduated at 17, so I was much smaller than everybody else in my grade, and so I started weightlifting in 10th grade. By the time I was 21, 22 years old, I mean, I latched onto it like crazy. It's a very disciplined sport where it's just you against the weights. And I became a state champion here in Kansas under the NASA, which is Natural Athletes Strength Association, and hold a couple of records over 500 in the bench, and squatting 675 and things like that. So the same kind of determination. Once I would latch onto something, I would take it as far as I could possibly take it. So it was in the weightlifting too. So when it came to getting on the fire department, I was 30 years old. I applied to get on there, and when I made it all the way to an interview, they started asking me questions like, well, do you have firefighter 1? I was like, no, sir. Do you have firefighter 2? No, sir. Do you have any EMT training? I said, no, sir. And I was starting to get a little embarrassed at that point, because how could I make it to an interview and not even know that I could have any of these things? And so I just told him, I said, look, I didn't even have a suit that fit. I was using an old suit, and my chest was like 50 inches and my suit couldn't even close. So I didn't even look like I should have even been there. And I shouldn't have. So I told him, I said, I'll see you guys next year. And I said, I'll have all these things I'll have these things, and I'll see you next year. They probably just thought I was yakking, but I immediately got my firefighter 1 through LSU, firefighter 2, and was halfway through an EMT class the following year when another position came available with the same department. This time I went to the men's warehouse outlet where you buy your suits and stuff on TV, where he says, I guarantee it. And I went and bought me $600 worth of clothes, and they're all tailored to fit. I was looking good. And that's the first time I shaved my head, because at 30 years old, I was starting to show some gray hair. And I said, I've got to take away even the chance that they will look at me and say, he's too old, because they see some gray hair. So that's when I started shaving my head for that interview. And because I didn't want them to see any gray hair. So I go into this interview, and they're looking at the paper, and they're like, you were here last year. And they said, we remember the conversation. And they said, by golly, you did exactly what you said you were going to do. You got all of these things. And so they hired me. And that was the last time I could possibly try, because they wouldn't hire someone at 31 years old. That was the last year I could get it. And it was everything I had to have for my daughters, for my family, for health insurance, for life insurance, for all of those things. I couldn't get them because I've been insulin-dependent diabetic since I was a small child. So that was really my last opportunity. And I wanted to make sure, just like I was telling Mark, the movie Rudy, where he did everything possible to get on that football team. And even at the end, he's lighting the candles at the church, because he's asking the Father, have I done enough? you don't want to beat yourself up by saying I didn't do enough. That will eat you up more than anything else. I would rather do everything that I can and then fail than to leave some stones unturned and then beat myself up about it. And the only reason I tell this story is because I want people to understand that that's what I bring into my Bigfooting. The same kind of tenacity and leave no stone unturned and pay attention to details and training and all of those things. And I've got to say, it's taken 13, 14, 15 years, but it's really starting to come to fruition. But, there are certainly things that has happened and it started with me just wanting to see one. And like I said, now that you know how I was before I got into Bigfooting, imagine me saying, by golly, if they're out there, I've got to see one. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Got to see it. And so that began a 3-year path for me of just going down to the Kiamichis of Oklahoma. I mean, every couple of weeks I was down there for 4 days at a time because of my fire department schedule. And it culminated in me meeting someone. And that, again, was a goal of mine. When I wasn't having much luck, I said, well, then I've got to meet somebody that can teach me. So I met somebody at I think it was the very first Honubby conference down there. And I met him, we became friends, and he did teach me some things. And it culminated in me having the Chickasaw Park encounter. It was all because of this gentleman that I met. And I met him because I had to see one. And I did whatever I had to do to see one. So isn't that crazy?
Hey, yeah, well, you've got a mountain of evidence and some great encounters to go over. So just go ahead and jump into the Chickasaw encounter if you want to.
Okay, well, what happened was my friend, his name was Keith, and he lived in Paul's Valley. And so I heard a lot of stories about it. And it culminated into a time when he and I spent 4 or 5 days together in the Kiamichis, and I was actually taking him home. I took him home, and my plan was to go on down to the Chickasaw Park, find campsite 30, and just spend the night in campsite 30. Yeah. But what I had done was I had read anything and everything that I could about the park. And one thing that I read was somebody had reported that they had come back to their campsite at 10 or 11 o'clock one night and saw something running from their campsite. So that's exactly what I took to develop what I did for my encounter. I says, well, if a creature was in somebody's campsite while they were gone, he was in there because he either knew they were gone or I need to make it to where he thinks you're gone. So right. That was the basis on what I read there to what I did, which was tape up the windows of my truck, went down there in the off season, went back there to campsite 30 and there's a lot of details on that particular encounter that people would find interesting, and they are interesting, but it's such a long story. It may be better with all the other podcasts that I've done. People can actually find that somewhere and listen to all the details, but I will go ahead and hit all the high points. And that is, I taped up blankets inside my truck. Well, I went up and set up my campsite first. I set up a tent and a table and some other things. And then I went into town, which is only a mile away, even less, to Sulphur to get something to eat. And it was probably 7 or 8 o'clock. It was just past dark or dusk. And so I went into town to a Sonic and got me something to eat. And when I came back to where the camp host would be, there was no camp host there because it was in the off season. It was in February. And I had my windows taped up. And when you go through the park, it's a one way. So you go one way through all of these campsites, and there's like 130 campsites in this whole park. But in the off season, they have parts of the park gated off so that you only have access to like the first 40. But fortunately, campsite 30 was the one I was directed to go to because of my friend. And so I pulled through the park actually with my blankets all taped up, and I had them parted just over my steering wheel so that I was driving like this, looking through my, but since I was the only one there, it was, I could hit a tree. It'd be no big deal. And my truck looks like I've hit lots of trees. So anyways, so So I just wormed my way up there and I pulled into my parking spot and I never even opened the door. I parked it and that was it. I had already had a parabolic sitting on top of my truck. I had the headset coming through the door so that I could listen. And I was recording to some micro cassettes with the old cassettes that you twist with a pencil when they start coming unraveled.
Yeah.
So it was the very beginnings of anything that I'd ever tried to capture. So that in itself was a nightmare. But because the tapes were so small, they could only record for like 5 minutes, and then you grab another one, and next thing you know, I'm taping over ones that were already used, and it was just a nightmare. So whoever developed digital recorders, I hope they're sitting on a beach somewhere enjoying life, because they've certainly made our lives easier. But anyway, so I'm sitting in camp, and I've got a jar that I could use the restroom in, because I was determined to never open the door. From what I had read at that point, you never know when they're 50 yards, 100 yards away watching you. You just don't know. So I was determined that if they were, that the camp appeared empty. They never saw any movement. They couldn't see through the glass and see any movement. That's why I had it taped up with blankets. And so I'm just sitting in there in the dark, just with my seat kicked back, and I'm listening. And it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock. I can't be exact on the time, but it was sometime around that time frame. I start hearing footsteps of something walking through leaves and making that distinct sound of crunch, crunch, crunch. But I was also hearing something that it took me a few times for my head to say, that's what that is. But it was dragging a stick. I heard it dragging through gravel. And this was my first time at the park, so I was really unfamiliar with the layout of the whole park, unlike I am now. There's actually things I know now that make I have answers for some of the things that happened that night that I didn't know that night, that I do know after the fact, that I can explain now. What I didn't know at the time, what I was hearing was something going from trash can to trash can, dragging a stick. I was hearing it also hit metal lantern posts, because I was hearing a ding, a metal ding, where it was hitting these metal. And in my mind, I'm like, what is that? What is it hitting? But then 30 seconds later, I would hear another one. And by the time I heard the third or fourth one, my head says, it's hitting lantern posts. It's walking through the park and it's tapping the lantern post with that stick on his way to each trash can. Because then I would hear a trash can lid pop open and the trash can lid be put back on. And they had cinder blocks on top of their trash cans. It is the old metal types that just have the lids with the chain attached to the lid. And then you would use a cinder block to keep the raccoons out of it. So whatever it was disassembling this and putting it back together the way it was. That's what I'm hearing. So of course I'm getting excited. Of course I'm like, it could, at this point, it could be a person. I don't know yet, but it was kind of chilly. I mean, it was in February. So anyways, so I'm listening to all of this happening and I'm getting kind of excited, and I keep peeking out and looking through the woods. There was a full moon that night. It was very bright, so you could easily see. And so I'm kind of looking through the woods, looking for any shadowy movement or anything when I'm hearing things. But I don't see anything for a while. But at some point, I hear this thing walking, and you got to understand, at this point, I'm only hearing one person or thing or whatever I'm hearing walking. There's only one, even though I eventually see two. So there's only one at this time, and it's going from trash can to trash can. And only after putting the facts together after the fact do I believe it was the small one. There was a small one out of the two that I see, and I believe because of the behaviors that I was hearing, that indicates to me that it was the juvenile, because he was acting like a juvenile. He was acting like he was very risky, and the noises that he was making, I don't think he expected anyone to be in the campsite. It was the off season and nobody else was there, not even a camp host. So I think they'd probably been making it a regular duty of them to go through the camp to look in the trash cans, even though they shouldn't have been going through the trash cans because it was the off season and there shouldn't be anything in the trash cans. Right. But what I learned later is Sometimes there were things in the trash can. Dr. Charles Hallmark from Sulphur was baiting those trash cans in the off seasons prior to my visit there that I was unaware of. So he actually set this up for me because they were in the park looking for his baits, because he was actually trying to get their fingerprints on things that he would put in the trash cans. I spoke to him later about what happened to me, and that's when I learned all the details of what he had done. So he was clearly the person who set up the events that made my thing happen. So I'm eternally grateful to him, and he has no idea, and he has subsequently passed away. Rest his soul. So, but yeah, it was an incredible night. When it finally stopped walking is when I thought to myself, it sees me, because I had heard it moving constantly up to that point, going from trash can to trash can, hitting lantern posts, dragging that stick, just like a kid would do. And then all of a sudden he stops. So I knew at that point, I said, he has to see my truck. He has to see my campsite. And so then I start looking out my windows and I start peeking out, and I had it right at the corner of my truck where I could look in my side mirror to look down back behind my truck. And that's where I saw him. He looked out around a tree like this, where he put both hands and looked out around the tree and then ducked back behind the tree. And that's the first time I saw something, and it looked like a person. I said, it's right back there. I mean, he's right there behind my truck. So I knew where he was. And I was really, my heart was starting to increase at that point, and I was very excited. I didn't have a size reference. I just had a shape reference. It looked like a person. I don't know if it's the small one. I don't know if it's the big one. I didn't know there was going to be another one at that point. But then it hits the tree. This is the first time I hear it hit a tree. All night long, he's been hitting lantern posts. Never hit a tree. But now he hits a tree. And after he hits the tree, I hear something sloshing across Rock Creek. And he's joined by a second one. If you can't gather some information from that right there, that tells you they had pre-planned a communication where if he hits a tree, the other one would come across and join him, because he never hit a tree up to that point, and he could have walking through the park. He was clearly hitting lantern posts. Lantern posts didn't make that one come across the creek, but the moment he hit the tree, the one came across the creek. That's a significant piece of information, especially what we know about tree knocks now being a form of communication. So take that as you will. That's just what I gathered from what happened then. So I'm going to assume, because of the behaviors, that it was the juvenile going through the park, and it was the big one that was on the other side of the creek waiting for a sign, waiting for the communication. And sure enough, here he came. And so they were back there for a while.
A quick interjection at this point. I do not go over the owl calls at this point. It will be addressed a little later, and Mark will play the audio of those owl calls. I was just hitting all the highlights, so I immediately go into where they broke from the tree line behind my truck and came up to the corner of my truck, omitting the details of the owl calls until later.
The tree, because that's where they were. It was a pretty good sized tree. So that, and what I didn't know is it dropped down to another road before the other campsites, and then it dropped down into the creek. So they were actually on that little paved road behind that tree. And so that's why I was watching that spot. Anyways, when they broke from that corner and came into the back of my truck, I was watching them. I mean, I had full bodied views of both of them. And he was leaned over, and his arms were swinging, and his hands were probably about 1.5 feet from the ground. So he was ready to go into 4x4 mode if he needed to. He looked like he was positioning himself that if he needed to bolt out of there, he could have went into 4x4 mode. The little one was actually bumping into his right hip, they were both, it's almost like they were trying to get to the back corner of the truck as fast as they could. And the little one was staying right with him and bumping into him to get there. And as soon as they got to the back corner of the truck, the little one moved in behind the tailgate. That's the last I saw of him. He had his hands and was dropped down behind the tailgate. And the tent The big one was at the back corner of the truck, which puts the truck between him and the tent. He put something between him and where he thought the threat would be, if there was a threat in that campsite, which is the tent.
Right.
So I'm watching him, and I see his full body standing right there at the corner of my truck, which is about 10 foot from me. And I see his hand with a thumb pointing straight towards the sky, grab the side post and the cross beam on the back. And he was looking over the tent. I mean, you could tell he was nervous. He was looking at the tent, as you would expect with his experiences in that park. That's where people are at. You could tell the tent was his focus of attention, and he was waiting to hear something of somebody unzipping the tent door or putting some clothes on or whatever, and it never happened. But he also made a movement that I thought he was coming down the driver's side of the truck. And so you got to understand, from my point of view, I just went from excited to heart attack mode. The moment I thought he was coming down to the driver's door, I mean, I went into as close as to a panic that you can and still try to be quiet. My heart was racing, and even though I had blankets up, I'm still moving in behind the A post of my truck and trying to scrunch down. And that's when I saw my shirt on my chest going boom, 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 and my heart was beating so hard. I thought to myself, if he's touching my truck, he can feel the truck move of my heart beating, because I could feel like I felt like I was moving the whole seat with my heartbeat. So I'm thinking he can feel the truck pump pulsating with my heartbeat, and that scared me too. So I pulled my back off the seat because I didn't want him to feel the truck moving with my heartbeat. I just didn't want him to know I was in the truck.
Right.
But what happened almost immediately after all of that was happening in my own head was the back end of my truck squatted down, where I thought he was climbing into the back of my truck. I didn't know until the next day, with a closer look at the evidence on my truck, I believe he was standing on my bumper. But in my truck, all I was hearing, and the truck was squatting down. So I'm like, oh my goodness, he is in the bed of my truck. I'm thinking he's in the bed of my truck. And I was thinking to myself, he's going to climb over the cab of my truck. He's just going to keep on climbing until he's on the cab of my truck, and he's going to crush it. And so I actually touched the key in the thing. I'm like, I'm going to have to start up my truck with this thing in the back of my truck. And I'm like, am I going to be able to take off? Am I going to be able to go with him? So you've got all of these thoughts just pummeling each other in my head. But in a split second, I realized that he wasn't climbing onto the cab of my truck, because I heard him shuffling through the stuff in the bed of my truck. Now, the next day, I don't know exactly where he was and how he was doing this, but from my determination the next day, from where I saw these big dusty marks on the outsides of my bumper, that tells me that's where his feet were. I mean, spreading all the way from side to side of my truck is where his feet were. And he was actually probably leaned over my ladder racks, rummaging through the stuff in my truck. That's how big this thing was. So that seems like a more plausible explanation to what was happening when I felt the truck drop and hearing stuff moving around in the bed of my truck, was him actually on the bumper and leaning over the ladder racks and rummaging through stuff. But he flipped over a generator, and there was Tupperware containers that were jostled around. And throughout all of this, there was 2 little propane tanks sitting at the back corner of my truck. And I heard them clank together, where things were being moved. And then you hear clank, and everything stopped. And then you hear clank, 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 like that's where something's attention was on those tanks, because it was tapping them together several times. And then things quieted down to where I wasn't hearing much of anything, and it got off my truck, and things were quiet. But I was thinking, my plan was that, and I practiced this, I've made sure that my headlights came on without turning the truck on. My plan was that if anything happened, I was going to sit there and bide my time and ride it out no matter what. And if they move into the front of my truck, I had a night vision camcorder Sony camcorder. I was going to film through my windshield in relative safety and just hit my headlights and catch them right in my headlights and be filming when I turn the headlights on and catch them. That was my plan. And so far it was working to where I'm like, at some point they're going to be in the front of my truck, but they never came to the front of my truck. They never came that way. They did all their stuff in the back of the truck and then they left the way they came. And when they were walking away, I heard what sounded like the stick hitting metal, like I heard before with the little one hitting the lantern post. I heard that same sound, but apparently it was the two tanks. They took them. It was apparently those tanks being clanked together because they were gone the next day. So
that's interesting. I wonder why they chose that, because of the sound, or?
Well, because I heard them tapping them together several times. That has to be what interested. I think it was the little one, because he was the one that ducked down behind the tailgate and they were right there in the back corner. So I bet you he's the one that reached over and I bet you he's the one that took them.
Probably.
But I don't know.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I don't know how long I could have sat there with 110 foot behind me.
Well,
like
I could have started my truck up. I mean, I could have been racing into town with one hanging off my ladder rack.
Yeah, you could have went through Sonic saying, "Look what I got."
Yeah, if things would have worked out right, I could have been racing into town with one hanging off the back of my truck.
That would have been great.
But you can't go very fast in that little windy, campsite. So, he'd have been able to jump off so easy.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, I first heard this story probably 7 years ago, and I was recovering from a health issue. I used to work swing shift on a 7-day rotation, and I got sick and went into a coma, and I was off work for almost a year. And I had an interest in Bigfoot, and this was one of the first stories that I heard, encounters, and it motivated me that I need to get myself well, because this is what I want to do. I want to get out in those woods and see one. And I just really thank you for telling that story, Randy, because it's one of my all-time favorite encounter stories. It's just...
Well, hardly a day goes by that it doesn't cross my mind in some fashion. And most of the time, it's right before I'm trying to fall asleep. That's why I stay up till 2 o'clock every night. The what ifs. What if I'd have got out? What if this happened? What if I keep living with the what ifs, because having to live with the why didn't I do this and why didn't I do that, that'll haunt you, man.
Yes, it will.
Well, Randy, let's go back a few years. And why don't you tell us about the whoop that you captured at Spencer Creek?
Well, it was after the Chickasaw Park encounter, and I saw a gentleman posting something that he had a couple pictures that he was arguing with somebody about, and I just sent him a message. And I said, "Hey, I want to see these pictures." And he said, "You'll have to come see them in person." He said, "Because I'm not going to post them online." So I drove down there, and he lived by Spencer Creek off Lake Oolaga, and I looked at his pictures, and I wasn't dissatisfied with them. I thought it was a pretty good picture, and I can actually send that to you, Mark. But it was a game cam that caught something over on the side, and it looks vertical, and it looks like you can see the bottom of a foot. I like it. I like it in the fact that when I saw the picture, that's all I had to go with. Is he had some good stories, and he had a couple of pictures that I could look at. But it started a friendship where he allowed me free reign of his place, and he had a couple of 100 acres, and he sold hunting leases. So he had tree stands, and every year, and I would talk to some of his hunters too, because he'd had hunters that would see stuff. And so I started going down there. I spent a couple of years, and a lot of activity, a lot of your typical Bigfoot activity that ends up with no sighting, but a lot of B-roll activity where, I'd take my daughter. My daughter was 14 at the time. Her name was Ashley. And, she didn't mind going with me at times. And the picture that's on the link to this page showed a little trailer that I could pull with my ATV. That was on Spencer Creek. That was what we called my coffin, because we felt like when I was in that thing and there was stuff going on that I would end up being killed in that thing. But so that was my little coffin. But I would sleep in there on Spencer Creek, and I would have a parabolic sitting in one of those holes. You could see the holes in the side of the trailer. It would fit just perfectly in there, and I'd be sitting in there listening. And I heard a lot of good stuff that way. But my daughter would join me at times, and there'd be times we'd be in that box getting hit with rocks all night long, and it was exciting for her. It was exciting for me to share that with her. And, we'd get up and we'd investigate the next day. But in the very beginnings, I wasn't as brave as I am now. I needed that plywood around me to give me some kind of comfort. I was even less comfortable in a tent, but having that plywood around me made me a little bit more comfortable. But I was willing to share that with anybody who was willing to go and put in, some long, hot nights in those areas. If you wanted to experience something that you can't explain, I was willing to do that. And so I would take people there. But one of the recordings I got one night involved 20 to 25, maybe even 30 of those whoops. And I'm telling you, they were all over the place. And in my mind, it was kind of like in the beginnings, the first 4 or 5 years of my being involved in this. So I'm still trying to learn things. So when I was hearing this whoop, I would hear a whoop, and then later I'd hear another whoop over here. And I'm like, man, that thing is really moving. That thing is moving all over the place. I'm like, because he's over here now. And then I hear a whoop, and I'm like, that thing he is covering some ground. And one time I heard some splashing in the creek, like it was running through the creek, also in close proximity. So I was talking to Mike Humphreys, whose brother Tim Humphreys had the Humphreys cabin, where the Bigfoots were attacking the cabin. So he's, I think he was on a TV show, Killing Bigfoot too. So nice gentleman. He was very open with sharing things, and we spoke a little bit, and he listened to the whoop, and he said, oh yeah, he said, that's a locator call. He said, how many of those did you hear? And I said, well, probably 25 or so that night. And he's like, oh yeah, there was a hunting party and they were keeping track of each other. And I was like, oh my goodness. Okay. I said, I thought there was one just moving around. He said, oh no. He said, one would whoop over here and the other one would be like, well, okay, I'm over here. And then another one would whoop over here. And that certainly made more sense than the way my mind was trying to interpret it. So it's nice to, know that I've talked to people that have given me information that I can go with from that point forward a little bit smarter than I was the day before. Yeah. And so he was one of those guys. I want to make sure that he gets credit for that. So if you want to play that whoop, that would be nice.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to play this whoop, and I will play it 5 times. I'm going to tell you, if there are any audio folks out there, if you look at this spectrogram, this is exactly what you're looking for with possible Bigfoot vocalizations. You see the main fundamental line, and then you also, which in our neck of the woods, we don't always get harmonics. Now, if we head over into Arkansas, we will get harmonics. And harmonics is lines that are stacked on top of each other. But this is just an excellent example of probable Bigfoot vocalizations.
It's always nice to hear when you're out there, for sure.
Well, yeah, and I've got a bit of corroborating story that goes with that particular property. One of the Bigfoots on Doug's property was he would call the basketball player. He said it was tall and skinny. He said it looked like an NBA basketball player, and that it was muscular but very tall and skinny. And he said one time he was in a tree stand, and he said it was coming down a fence line, and when he looked out his tree stand and it saw him, he said it did a cartwheel into the brush.
Wow.
So I think it was trying to dive in head first, but it caught its hands and ended up doing a cartwheel. But
Yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting story. But fast forward to just a few years ago, I got contacted by a gentleman who I became friends with on Facebook. And he said, I live by Lake Ulaga. So, of course, I'm like, okay, yeah, what's going on? He said that he and a friend were frog gigging on Spencer Creek. And man, by then I'm like, yeah, I got to hear what you got to say. And he said that they were frog gigging and they were coming back towards the lake where his truck was parked. And he said that they were being followed by something. And he said he kept hearing just movement of something following them. And he says, they kept looking at each other like, what is that? What is that? And so they got back to their truck, which is on this gravel road. And I actually went out, met the guy, and spent a night in a different field in relation to the Doug's property that I had spent 2 years before after talking to him. But he said that they were on one side of his truck and they heard whatever it was come up out of the creek. And he said, so they reached over and shined a light. And he said, there it was. He said it was standing there and it took off running down the road. And he said it got about 50 yards down the road, went behind a tree and stopped and looked at him standing on 2 feet. And he said it had its hand on the tree looking at him. And he said the hand looked like boat paddles. He said the hands were so big, it looked like, he said it looked like a basketball player. And when he said basketball player, that's the way Doug was describing the one that he would see on his property. And this is basically the same area. So to me, that validated what Doug saw. And it also validated what this gentleman was trying to explain to me. And so I ended up spending the night there. Of course, nothing happened while I was spending the night there, but it's two good stories of two people that didn't know each other, talking about the same description of a creature.
Right. So, that's definitely a spot to check out, no doubt. Well, talk to us about the next encounter you had where you had a bluff charge in the area of Mount St. Helens.
Well, in 2015, I volunteered to be a part of the Falcon Project. Anybody who knows about that knew that it fell apart, didn't happen. But I was there. I was there with 5 or 6 other gentlemen who was ready to be a part of it also. As things started to unfold, we were actually waiting for it to come together so that we could get started, but we were there a few weeks early. And we were actually going from place to place because at the time we were in the Walla Walla in the Blue Mountains, where I had been there a couple of times. And so that's why we were there starting off. But then we ended up going up to outside of Morton. And it's a little lake called a Rift Lake, and it's north of Mount St. Helens. And so we went in there to a campsite, and we started having stuff happen the first night that we were there. I mean, some really exciting stuff. One of the guys saw one while he was trying to sleep in the back of his truck. He had a little camper shell, and it was actually picked up our trash bag by a canopy that I had. And I had him draw a picture of it, and he drew a picture so perfect of that thing standing by the canopy digging in the trash can that I held it up and matched it up with the canopy, and then took a picture of my hand because it matched up perfect. He drew it perfectly. And wow. So I don't know if you could show that picture or not. But anyways, so that happened one night. And then one night we had something circle our campsite in the wood line, screaming in 3 or 4 different octaves. And I slept through the whole thing. And when I finally did wake up, I turn on my thermal and I'm looking around and I see everybody standing up outside like this, and they're looking at my tent, because I got my thermal and they're like, Randy, did you get that? Did you get that? Of course, I think I had low blood sugar. You know, if anything like that happens where I seem inept, I blame it on low blood sugar. So, so
Look used to that, Randy. That's what Mark does.
So anyway, so I missed out on that one. But the next night or two, I told the guys about my Chickasaw Park encounter and how I did that with my windows taped up. And I said, so I like to do that. I said, I like to tape up my windows and drive around and wait for some action to happen. So that's what me and two of the guys from that expedition did. We got in my truck, had a parabolic, and I had split the parabolic 3 ways. So we all had a headset on, and I had the windows taped up, and I had it to where I could drive on the logging road. It's like 2 a.m. and we drive and we stop. And we just sat there chit-chatting. We never opened the door or anything. And just woods all around us, mountains and, you know, logging road. And we just stopped and nothing happened. And I told him, I said, if nothing happens in about 30 or 40 minutes, we'll move to another spot. So we moved to another spot, don't hear anything. And then a third time we drive for a mile or so and we stop again. And in a couple of minutes, we hear 3 knocks. Pow, pow, pow. Just above, somewhere on the hillside above us, and we're all like, all right, that's a good sign. So we'll sit here for a while. That's nice that we're hearing something. Whatever that was, I'm thinking it came down because all of a sudden what starts happening next is in such close proximity to my truck. It sounded like it was just right next to us, but he was not happy. You could tell he was he was doing some things. I know that there were other Bigfoots around because he whistles. And when he whistles, I know he's not whistling for us. He's whistling because he's communicating with another Bigfoot. So he whistles and then he does 3 tree knocks that are so unbelievably loud and fast that I can only describe them as sounding like gunfire. And then after that, he goes into a temper tantrum that culminates into a bluff charge. And the temper tantrum involves ripping branches off the tree, and I mean snapping them off clean. There's no bending and twisting or no splintering, but popping, where they go snap, where they're coming off the tree clean, which you can only imagine is immense power. And so he's going through this theatrics of display where you can hear him pacing, like he ripped a few branches off and he's pacing back and forth, like he's having to think about what he's doing. And he's almost like he's having to build himself up. You can hear him moving around like, okay, and then you can hear him take a couple steps to come forward, because at one point you hear what clearly sounds like him stepping on like a log and breaking it because it goes crunch. But I think that was him moving forward while he's pacing and building himself up, because at some point he gets right next to the logging road and he takes off running. We don't see it. We're just listening because we are just enamored by the fact that we're hearing this amazing stuff, and it was precluded by a whistle and this triple knock and a further away triple knock also. So we absolutely believed it was a Bigfoot because of the things that happened before that. So when we heard this thing start running on the logging road, you can hear his feet hitting the ground, slapping the ground with his feet. And we just assumed he was running towards my truck. And I'm telling you, we were at that point starting to be a little nervous. And I was bracing. I grabbed a hold of my seat to brace myself because I remember those old shows when we used to watch Disney on Sundays, the shows before that had the animals, the guy that would work the animals. I remember them trying to tag a rhinoceros that was hitting the side of the Jeep. And in my mind, I'm thinking he's about to hit the side of my truck. And that's all I could think of was a rhinoceros hitting the side of those Jeeps that I would see when they would try to tag a rhinoceros. But he didn't. But he runs right on by. And then you hear him turn off into the woods like he was totally spent. Like he just spent 10 minutes building up his adrenaline, his nerve, and then his bluff charge was all that he had left in him. And when he starts going back into the woods, you hear him just trudging away, breaking a couple branches as he's walking away, but he's clearly spent at that point, unlike before where he was all agitated and building himself up. This was spent. And it's an amazing going from one end of the spectrum to the other by being able to ride this out to the end to get to where he has spent himself. And it's just amazing. I can't believe that I was lucky enough to get all this, and it was just fantastic.
It is a cool experience.
I tell you what, we got the audio clips of this, and I've kind of edited them, so it's like 4 different clips, but I put them together. But what I want to warn the audience, when Randy talked about the 3 knocks that sounded like shotguns going off rapidly. If you're wearing headphones or you got the volume turned up, you may want to take the headphones off or turn the volume down, because it is amazingly loud. But I didn't want to lower the volume on it. I wanted for our audience to actually be able to hear how loud they are. So we'll play that audio clip now. That was amazing. What would you do, Larry Porch, in that situation?
Ooh, stand there and grin.
Yeah, that's usually what we do when things start wrapping up. We just grin. But that is an awesome capture.
Yeah. Then later you clean out your underwear. Later.
Okay, we've got to keep moving on.
Well, we need to go into this was fantastic, and it may be the best thing that I've ever captured on audio when you start to put the picture together of what was going on. But I've got some audio from the Kiamichi Mountain areas that I'd like to discuss with people before we get into the 400. And I know we might be getting short on time at some point.
Well, right now we're okay. So let me go ahead and ask you about the multiple experiences you have had at the Kiamichi Ridge.
Okay, well, of course, it starts in 2005 when I was with the gentleman that I met who was kind of teaching me a little bit. I hadn't had a sighting yet, but in 2005, we got a video called the Ridgewalker video, and we're only about 2 miles, maybe even less as the crow flies, from the Humphreys cabin. And that's why I picked this spot, because I wanted to be somewhat close to the Humphreys cabin, in the fact that they were saying that the Bigfoots were coming to their property from that west southern side ridge. And so that's where I started establishing this campsite in proximity to their cabin. Anyways, so in 2005, we got this video that we call the Ridgewalker video. It's just a short 11 seconds where this thing walks across the ridge and then comes back. We didn't know we got it. because what we did is we were camping in this campsite, and we had the camera set up on a tripod, filming uphill, watching this ridge as the sun was setting. But we'd been filming all afternoon. I think there was like 7 hours of filming where we just let it film in the hopes of catching something that you never know if you catch anything or not. And we just did what we were doing. I was doing tree knocks at the time. You can actually hear me doing knocks in the video. I was doing single knocks about once every 3 minutes. And the reason we had the camera set up the way we did, my friend talked a lot with Mary Green from Tennessee, and she was the Bigfoot lady. At the time, she was investigating for the BFRO. Very nice lady, and I met her because of my friend, and she is the one who suggested setting a camera up away from your activity, looking away, not pointing it, and not looking in that direction. Just let the camera do the looking for you. And so she deserves all the credit for us getting that video, and she's passed away, but she's the real deal. And she was very generous with her time, and anything that she could tell us that would help us, she did, obviously. And I want to make sure that she gets credit for that. But anyways, so it starts off with that video, and then everything happened after that because I just kept going back and kept going back.
Well, we're showing the video now, and if you look at it, you see a bipedal creature walking back and forth. Why don't you kind of paint for us a picture, Randy, of this area and how remote it is?
Well, it's probably a quarter mile off pavement, but at the time we were there, even now it's pavement, but at the time it was gravel road, and it was the last state highway in all of the United States that was still gravel. So it's been paved since then, but it was gravel at the time. And when I see a state highway that's still gravel, I mean, you're in the boonies.
Yeah.
So anyways, so that's where we were at, and that's the only road in on this particular ridge. It can go back for several miles and cuts off into 2 or 3 different locations, but you got to come back out this way. This is the only road in and out. Well, you can go up by the dumpsters, but that road is so ruddy, you absolutely have to have an ATV to get in that way. This is the only road that a vehicle can get in. So we've had lots of stuff happen here. After that fact, so much activity. We go up there all the time. There's actually a gentleman in the comment section now named Mark Roberts, who is a friend of mine, and I invited him up there to go up there with me one time, and we just slept in my truck. We drove back up on that ridge and parked one night and slept in the truck. And I told him, he slept in the back seat, and I slept in the bed that had a little cover over it. I said, look, if something happens, don't get excited. I said we're gonna let it play out. no matter what happens, we're going to let it play out so that we can, because I'll be recording. And he was like, okay. I said, we get cell phone coverage up there, so just text me. If something happens, just text me, and we'll talk we'll just talk back and forth through text. And so 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't remember what it was. We were pretty much falling asleep at that point. And all of a sudden, this rock hits the truck. And I mean, it's a good size. It sounds like about a softball sized rock that hits the top of that truck. And Mark came unglued. He came unglued. He was moving around. I know at 3 o'clock when he's about to sleep, he probably kind of melted into the floorboard a little bit and was kind of stuck in there. But the moment that truck was shaking like sardines trying to get out of a sardine can, man. But it was exciting. It was exciting. I did record a branch breaking after that, but I think it was as whatever this creature was, I think he was already retreating, and that branch being broke was just him retreating because nothing else happened after that. But that was a good sized rock, and I was very, very happy that happened, because at the time Mark hadn't had any experiences, and this was one of the first times he came out with me, and it always makes you feel good when you take somebody out and they can experience something like this, because now he's my biggest fan and my biggest cheerleader, and I appreciate him like you wouldn't believe.
Go ahead, Larry.
Was he happy about the experience after it happened?
Oh yeah. He just he wants more. So yeah, as we all do.
That's what it leads to. The adrenaline addiction.
Yeah.
Now, you actually from there captured some bipedal running. Can
Yes.
you set up this audio clip for us?
Well, one time I was there with a bunch of people, and it was the first time I had ever tried to set up a tent somewhere else with just a recorder laying in the bottom of the tent while we were all at this base camp. So I took a four-wheeler, went way up onto another ridge, way back somewhere, and just set up a tent, left a recorder in it, and then went back. So the next day I went and I got the recorder and I listened to it, and you can hear the four-wheeler tootling away down the road and getting quiet. And then about 30 minutes later, you start hearing noises. You start hearing something approach the tent. You hear a couple of rocks throw. But I hear something run by the tent, like it ran right by the corner of the tent and then ran away, almost like a kid would do. And that's the first time I heard that. And that was 10 years ago. And I had never set up another tent like that since then, until a couple of years ago, I started doing it again. And 2 nights in a row in 2 different locations, I got exactly the same thing. At about 2 a.m., something runs by the tents, and I set them up about 2 miles apart as the crow flies on different ridges. Uh-huh. It happened one night on one ridge, and I listened to it, and I was like, man, that is cool. I'm going to move the tent to a different location. And I did, and it happened again. What are the odds? 3 separate times you set up a tent with a recorder in 3 different locations, you get something sounds like it's running by it on a dare, and then runs right by it. And that's the recording that I'm going to share here.
Okay, let's play this. That is really cool. To know that you're in a remote location. And Larry, we have done that too before. Set up dummy camps and left recorders going nearby. It's just a great strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I've tweaked it a couple of different ways. I've recorded my grandsons playing in the house, and they were running back and forth, yelling at each other, crying, tripping and falling, and just being loud. So I'd record that for like 2 hours. And this particular run by, I was actually using that recording of my grandsons. I would put it in the tent also and let it play out. But it takes 2 hours for it to get to the end. So whatever's out there can hear two little boys in the tent for 2 hours. And then when it shuts off, that's when the run by happened. So I thought that was interesting. But I also like to put, and I've only done this once or twice, where I will hang a string with a piece of cardboard and I get a very small LED light and a small battery operated fan that blows, so that it blows this piece of cardboard and looks like there's movement in the tent. Ooh. Just slight movement with light, so that it will appear that there's somebody or something in the tent, and I'm safe back at the other camp.
Nothing wrong with that at all. Well, Randy, you told us a pretty cool story about you and one of your buddies that went up to Walla Walla around the Blue Mountains. Can you elaborate on that story a little bit?
Yeah, I've been up there 3 or 4 times. Did you actually see the picture that I sent you of the hairs that were stuck in the bug guts on my windshield?
Yes, we have that on the slideshow.
Okay, well, my first time up there in 2012, I have the 2 books about Paul Freeman called The Walla Walla Bigfoot and Bigfoot of the Blues. It's about Paul Freeman and Wes Summerlin and some other going-ons there, and a guy named Vance Orchard wrote the books. They do nothing but sing the praises of Paul Freeman. I don't think Paul Freeman is a hoaxer, but that's just me. So don't beat me up, or anybody that does think he's a hoaxer. I don't think he is. I was using the books, and they put locations in that book every time they would have something happen, or they were tracking one, or they saw a family of 3 or this. I would find those locations on the map, and then I would go spend some time in those areas. One of these locations was called Black Snake Ridge, and I was there about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was using my GPS to find it and get up there, but by that time I was exhausted. I'd spent all day doing other things. My thermal was down at the Educt Pond, which is where he got his video of the Bigfoots. So I was actually filming that pond all night long with my thermal while I was just out catting around. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm up on Black Snake Ridge, and I had hit a bug the night before on my windshield. And it was right in front of the steering wheel. And that thing had to have been the size of a bird. I mean, it left a big old splatter, and I did not want to hit my windshield wipers. So I was kind of looking around it as I was driving. Yeah. But so I pulled off into the woods because I needed a cat nap. It was like 2 or 3 a.m. And I just laid across the front seat and just went to sleep. And I woke up at like 7 o'clock with the sun shining through my windshield, and I'm laying there looking at my windshield, and I see hairs stuck in those bug guts. And it had just happened the night before. And I was like, oh my goodness. I got out and I started looking at it, and you can see a long hair that's blowing in the breeze stuck in those guts. And I look closely, and you can see tiny hairs smashed into them. That tells me something leaned across my windshield while I was sleeping there and looked at me. I climbed up on the hood of my truck and got my camera real close to it, and I took a picture of that. And if you blow that picture up, you will see tiny hairs completely smashed into that sticky bug guts. That is not just something that blows across the wind and gets caught in there. That's something that laid against my windshield while I was sleeping in the front seat. Wow. On a crew cab diesel 4-wheel drive truck.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now that creeps me out because I don't like the thought of sleeping in a vehicle and something looking in at me.
Yeah, it creeped me out too. Thinking, what would I have done if I'd opened up my eyes? I don't know. They'd find me dead there, and they'd be like, this 40-year-old dude had a heart attack.
I can understand that.
But anyways, so I'm hoping people can see that picture. Of course, I can't see it, but I was with a gentleman named J.C. Williams, and he's from Georgia, and he has spent a couple of times up there in the Walla Walla Mountains, and I've met up with him and camped with him, and it was an enjoyable process. He's a smart guy, and he was doing a month-long project where he would put out like 20 game cameras, and he would monitor them, and he'd put them in specific places. And if his studies, he was actually just studying bears and other animals, but if he was to come across any evidence of the Bigfoot nature, of course, he would share that. So he was a believer in that aspect. He hadn't really come up with any evidence yet or anything like that. But when I would go up there and I would see him, we would talk, and I would tell him stories, and I'd let him hear some of my stuff, and I'd tell him about some. So he told me that he was grateful, because there were times when he would start to get discouraged with enough time passing that he would never be able to get. He said, but when I would come up there and we'd have these stories, he said, I would leave him full of excitement and ready to get at it again. But while I was there, I was using my parabolic, and we carried my tent way up on a ridge and set it up and left a recorder in the tent, like the empty tent situation. So there were some things that we would do there also. But I was recording a lot of knocks at night. We were getting some knocks, and I'd be listening to them on my laptop the next day, and I'd say, here's another one, and he'd come over and listen to it. And we were talking about it, and he says, there's got to be a natural explanation. He said, I need to find a natural explanation to what is making these sounds. What could possibly be making these sounds that sounds like a knock? And I said, well, they seem to be happening from around midnight till about 4 a.m. They're time specific, and they seem to only be up on that ridge. I said, so why isn't it happening closer to camp? Why isn't one happening in the woods right over there? If it's something that's natural to the woods, it shouldn't be isolated up there on that ridge, and it shouldn't be time isolated between mid and about 4. That made sense to him, but he said, I'm still not ready to jump that gap. So the second night, I got another 25, 30 tree knocks that I'm listening to, but I get one knock that was specifically interesting. And that is, you can hear the stick break. Whatever was hitting the tree, the stick either vibrated out of its hand, or it broke apart and fell and hit and struck against the tree or the log. Whatever it was hitting, you could hear it clamor against that when it broke. That is huge, because I have an experience at the Chickasaw Park that I just explained to everybody earlier, where I heard one dragging a stick who had a stick in its possession throughout that whole process. So it's hard for me to go to any other belief of how they're making sounds, because I've got a couple of incidents where I hear a stick and I know they've got a stick in their possession. So now I've got to go with that until something is proven to me otherwise. So this audio shows all of these knocks taking place, and then I happen to catch one where the stick breaks, which is significant, if you ask me.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. I tell you what, let's go ahead and play a couple of these knocks. That's really cool. You remember you remember the first time you heard a knock, Larry? You got to think about it. I tell you, I remember my first one, and it sounded like Mark McGuire hitting one over the fence. And I was grinning like a possum eating briars, because I knew where we were at. There was no humans nowhere near that. And go ahead.
I was just say, I've got one like that I didn't share with you, because it would have just been another story that for 5 days, I was up by Mount Baker, which is not far from the Canadian border. And at 4 a.m. one morning, I got a knock that was so incredibly loud that I don't know if it's something that hit my truck or if it was a knock. But because I only woke up when it happened, so I don't really hear it until I listen to it on the recorder. It's just something that woke me up. But it was very loud, and so it's like what you were describing, a Mark McGuire home run type thing.
Randy, I want to ask you about your encounter on Lee Creek and the footfalls in the river crossing.
Yes, there's actually somebody in the chat room, and her name is Deb Tate. She lives not too far from Lee Creek. I was on Lee Creek because of somebody who had a sighting down there. And so I drove back through these river reeds to get to a specific spot, which was, maybe an eighth of a mile off the road, but very tough to get to. And I was able to get my truck down this bank and onto some flat rock area that was right next to the creek. And I set up my tent in front of the truck, and I had my recorder behind the wheel under the front tire. So, and I was in my tent, and around 3 a.m., 4 a.m., somewhere around that time frame, I hear something moving through the water, and it is displacing a serious amount of water. This is something that's got some serious weight behind it, cruising through the water. And I know the channel. I gave you a picture of my truck in that spot, so I don't know when people will be able to see that, but I sent you a picture of it. But so the channel part of that creek, I'm going to guess, because I would drive my Polaris Ranger into the water, but I could only go so far before it would start to get really deep. So I'm going to assume that the channel was about 6 foot deep. I can't say for sure, but it's pretty deep. So whatever this was, it trailed right on through that channel without too much problem. But what happened was that woke me up, and I set up in my tent in the pitch dark, and I'm sitting there listening, thinking that I have a visitor. Uh-huh. But what I didn't realize, because I sat there for 30 minutes listening and I don't hear another thing, but what I didn't realize until I listened to my recorder, that was actually him leaving, not him approaching. So what I have that happens before that is pretty fantastic, because you hear him coming through the water trying to be quiet, very stealthy. You can actually hear him moving through the water trying to be very quiet, but then he starts dinking and dunking rocks. You hear a rock hit the ladder racks on my truck and then hit the ground, and then you hear some coyotes in the distance, and you'll hear another rock be thrown. So he's just kind of going through the motions that we're all used to, which is the rock throwing, except it's reaching a crescendo where he's getting more aggressive. And at the end, you can hear him where he has a rock in each hand, because that's the only way that it works in my head to what I'm hearing. But you're going to hear some rocks go clack, 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 clack. So he has to have them in his hands. And then clunk, where it hits a piece of wood that I had stacked by my tent. So he's got rocks in his hands going clack, 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 clack. And then you hear it go thunk, where it hits a piece of wood. And that's when he leaves. And then you hear him sloshing through the water. So the difference between the noises that he makes when he's leaving is that he doesn't care that I hear he's leaving. Yeah. Unlike his approach was very stealthy, but him leaving was, I don't care who hears me.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's play this clip. That is cool stuff. And I'm going to tell you, me and Larry have camped there on Lee Creek. And if at the beginning of our show, you always hear a scream. And that was captured when me and Larry were hammock camping on the other side of the creek. And that's a great story. Y'all can go back and check one of our field evidence videos. We have it on there. And I remember another time that Shelly was in her tent, and she had a tent set up next to Debbie's tent, and she went to bed early. And where we were at, there was an island. And whatever it was, it probably crossed the creek and was using that island as a place to hide where it could peek over and look. And we captured, I don't know how many, 22 rocks being thrown near and around her tent. That is such a great spot to go boogering at.
Yeah. Well, and I saw that somebody posted a question in the chat room that was asking, was there ever a time when I felt like kicking my shoes off and taking off in a dead run out of fright? And I've got to tell you, when I sat up in that tent after hearing that thing cross the creek, and I thought it was coming to my tent, not leaving. So there was 30 minutes that I was sitting in my tent in the total darkness, a little bit scared out of my wits, because I'm thinking that did not sound happy. That sounded very aggressive. And what am I going to do if he's standing right outside my tent right now? And here's the clincher. I'm sitting there in the floor of my tent in the pitch darkness, and it's got to be like 4 a.m., still pitch dark. And all of a sudden I see lightning. And then I hear thunder. And then I see lightning again, and I go, oh crap, it's going to rain. And I'm on a creek. I'm on a creek bank. And I was about out of my mind with this sucks.
Yeah.
Because I have to get out of the tent because it looks like it's about to downpour and I'm in a creek bed. There's no way this is going to be safe. So I get out. It's pitch dark. I still don't know where this thing is because I haven't been able to listen to the audio yet. So I'm only going with what I just heard. And I had a trailer up in those river reeds that I had to get my truck up there, hook the trailer up, come back, get the Polaris Ranger and take it up there and get it onto that trailer and get all my stuff thrown in the truck. And I was doing that with just a little headlamp on, walking through those river reeds. And I aged probably 2 or 3 years that night.
I guarantee it.
But we might have to go into questions and then just save another talk about the 400 because we could do a whole show on the 400. It's getting close to 9:30. I don't know how many questions there's going to be. I want to make sure that if I ever do talk about the 400, that I give it all that it needs to give it, what people need to hear about it. I don't really want to jump through it real quick because it's fascinating. It's a fascinating place. So.
Okay, I tell you what, right before we jump to it, we got some snippets of that Randy has taken over the years of rock throwing, and we'll just play that, and then we will go and talk about the 400.
Okay.
I love it when rocks are being thrown at us. Because Larry Porch, it takes thumbs to be able to throw a rock.
That's true.
No doubt. No doubt.
Oh,
I'm just glad they don't throw them at us.
Yeah.
Just around us.
Yeah. Because there's no doubt that they could take your head off if they wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Randy?
All right. Yeah, Randy, we're taking up your time. Get on to the 400.
Okay. Well, of course, it starts with me meeting Shane. And we met up on the Kiamichi Ridge about 3 years ago. He came up there one October. We had a mutual friend, and we all started kind of chatting online, and we all ended up there. And that's the first time I met Shane. Thought he was a nice guy. I really didn't know him other than just, our brief text back and forth. But seemed like a nice guy. I think I might have watched a couple of his videos. I thought he was onto some good stuff. But that was as far as I knew about it. He had a little bit of car trouble when we were there. His alternator wasn't working too good. I gave him an extra battery that I had to see if it was his battery, and I ended up giving him a ride back to Springfield. So we had a couple-hour drive where we just chit-chatted on the way back, where I gave him a ride, and so we kind of got to know each other a little bit better then. But what I didn't know is he was feeling me out. For this project that he was on. but it was unknown to me at the time. I'm just glad that I said, all the right things, to make him pull the trigger. We've been able to do some things that I think 2013, I filmed a juvenile Bigfoot at Bennett Springs in Missouri. And it was the first time I was able to witness a behavior that I was not able to see again until we got to the 400. And that is when we were facing the creature, it was looking at us over some bushes like this. And it took him 3 minutes, but he was dropping very slowly. You could almost, it was imperceptible movement, but 3 minutes later, he was behind the bush. Yeah. That is an incredibly human behavior. That is not an animal behavior. So I sat on that for a long time, and I would tell people about it. I'm like, that was amazing. It happened again at the 400, the first night that we were there, and we caught the one in the field.
We have 2 videos in our library that covers this event. One covers the entire event of the evening when the filming took place, and this video here shows the next morning when we did the daytime investigation of the spot.
The way they dropped their head and those kind of things. And when it came to the young one that Shane approached in the field, it did it very slowly until Shane walked out there, and then it got all nervous and didn't know what to do. But it was doing the same thing, where the first time we watched it, we were actually facing it because I still wasn't sure it was our target species yet. So we were facing it. Normally we'll turn our back to them, but this time we faced it because we had the biologist with us. It was the first time he was with us, so we didn't turn around like we would like to, but we faced it. And because we faced it, it thought if it moved, we could see it. It's clear to me that they think that we can see just as well as they can, that their behavior is the same during the day and at night. And that is, they will blend in with the foliage, and then they move like this, where you will never notice. And they've learned that if they move slowly, you won't see it. And to capture that 2 or 3 separate times on thermal video in the middle of the night, and we just captured it this past time we were out there when Shane got the daytime footage. It was the same behavior that we're able to see of this type of movement. It just slowly drops. And I said, that's it. It's doing it. That's one. And then the head popped up about 10 foot away. That's what your listeners can take with them from what I'm saying here. If you've got a thermal camera, you look for just the part of a head that's showing and watch it, because they move very, very slowly. And if you think you're expecting to see one standing out in the clear, open, broad open, those are just accidents. Those are just happenstance, and they are very, very rare. You need to prepare yourself that they're only going to show part of their head when they're looking at you, and be aware of what it looks like, so you can zero in on that. And it's showing itself over and over again. And my goodness, it is really working out well for us. And as we go along, you guys are going to live this story the way we're living it. And we've got 2 juveniles out there that are really risk takers, and we are fortunate with what's going on out there. So I hope you guys are with us for this whole ride, because there's some things coming that I think it's groundbreaking, especially when you start to talk about behaviors. And I'm very fortunate to have been invited to it.
No, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it. And I know people always want the home run. They want the big shot of one walking across the open or whatever. But for somebody that does it in the woods, I understood every aspect of what was shown and what y'all are doing. It's baby steps to get to that, and y'all are taking the necessary steps to get to where you need to be.
That's absolutely true, Larry. Louis Perjeski asked, what park was your sighting at, Randy?
The campsite 30 at the Rock Creek in the Chickasaw National Park, south of Sulphur, Oklahoma. They have made a lot of changes over the last 7 to 8 years, and that is they've cut out all of the pine trees, and they've changed the trash cans to bear-proof trash cans. You can speculate all day long why they did two things that are completely dependent on Bigfoot's needing those things, and they changed both of those things. So I don't know why they did that. They said it was because of the droughts, but just know that I don't think the activity level is what it used to be. I'm sure they probably still come through there, but they just don't have the cover that they did before.
Well, two things they need to work on getting rid of is ticks and raccoons.
Raccoons.
They're terrible. All right. Do you think they can throw their voice?
I don't know. I don't know if they need to. Because they're so used. I'm telling you, the Bigfoot that Shane walked up on, you could tell by its behavior that it almost expected him to walk right by it, even while it was laying there in the grass, until he almost stepped on it. Its behavior said that they think that they can hide in close proximity to us and not have to worry. So they don't need to throw their voice, because all they have to do is get still and get motionless in a brush pile or some foliage, and we'll walk right on by them.
Yes, sir. That was Ray Dog.
Okay, Spencer Jameson asked, what exactly are you taping up to the windows? Is it something that helps block sound? Do you think the boogers suspect you're in there? And do you think it bothers them that they can't lay eyes on you?
Well, I can only go by what has happened. And I think that they will methodically approach a campsite, approach a parked car. How many parked cars do you think that they see parked on a logging road? Two teenagers making out, listening to the radio, or a couple dudes drinking a beer or smoking a bud or whatever. So they probably know that from 50 yards out, all they got to do is look, and they can see people inside a car. So when they can't see inside the car, I think it confuses them a little bit. And that's what I'm going on. It's just so that they can't see through the cab and see me in there moving around. If that makes it appear like the vehicle is empty, I'll go with that. But I can't know for sure exactly what it does to them. I just know that it's been successful enough with me that I will keep using it until it's not successful.
I agree with that. All right. You've covered Bama's question. He asked about the turn and run. Ruger Ridge asked, what state are you from or in?
I live in Kansas, just outside of Kansas City. But all of everything that I've done is from somewhere else: Missouri, Oklahoma, Washington. I've been to Kentucky. I've been everywhere.
Man, where do you get all your money to do all this traveling and stay for weeks at a time?
Well, I work pretty hard. When I work hard, I work hard. But I don't have a lot left over when I'm done Bigfooting.
Hey, I totally understand that.
Okay.
You sure don't get rich off of it.
Squatch Knocker asked, do you think they can get that auto gun sound by hitting in between two trees next to each other? Because that was some very fast knocks, and they were explosively loud.
I don't, man, all I can do is speculate.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be. I mean, I suppose it could be. Can you put the same kind of force going forward as back?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it had one in each hand. Maybe it was going pow, pow, pow. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Sally Olin wants to know, what kind of recorder do you use?
I use an Olympus. I don't know if it's a 5400 or a 3500. I'll have to look at one of them. But I use a parabolic called Silver Creek Parabolics. You can get them on eBay. They're about $200, and I've got like 4 of them. and I take the dish off. They come with like a 9-inch dish. I take the dish off, and I used all of my recordings have been gotten with these parabolics. They record at a 360 when the dish is off. They record all the way around. And matter of fact, I'll tape a magnet to one of them, and I just stick it on the side of my vehicle when I want to drive somewhere. Yep. They're very user friendly. They have a plug-in for your recorder, so you plug in your recorder, and then you turn the parabolic on as loud as you can handle it, and then you've got the ears that you can control the volume at, and that's how I get all my recordings, is through a parabolic with the Olympus recorder.
All right.
Okay, Spencer Jameson. Randy, having had so many probable encounters, what similarities have you noticed with all of those different locations?
Well, the Chickasaw Park, as a matter of fact, my first major sighting happened maybe 100 yards from an old folks' home on the southern end of Sulphur. I mean, you look through a couple of trees and you can see parked cars at that old folks' home. So if somebody tells me that they can't be that close to town or whatever, I beg to differ. I don't know what would limit where these things can go. They basically can do whatever they want. I would say as long as there's some kind of cover. I mean, they almost have to have cover. But apparently in places at the Chickasaw Park, it's a very narrow band of trees that they can travel through. Amazing, just amazing stuff. I mean, but like I said, we've got enough evidence now that if they hear somebody coming, all they got to do is stop wherever they're at and just blend in with wherever they're standing and wait till you pass. I mean, they are masters at not having to need much cover when they've learned that stealth is a better tool to have than even cover.
Right. Well, yeah, sometimes we're not very observant.
Well, I agree with that. I remember hearing all of the stories from Chickasaw Park. And when Larry and I went there carrying Dan and Vicky, it was like, this place is just a mile outside of town, but they have to use that river, is what was going through my mind, is they're using that river and the woods growing up around the river because it is so close to town.
I just wonder how many of those poor old folks in that old folks home look out the window and see them, and they tell somebody, and they're like, "Oh, she's crazy."
Well, being as gung ho as I am, I actually went in there and talked to some of the nurses.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I can't imagine that they haven't sitting out there in a wheelchair just enjoying nature.
Right.
Yeah.
So of course I'm going to go in and talk to those nurses. They think I'm fruity as a fruitcake, man.
All right. Bama Murdoch asks, have you ever thought of researching someplace without so many rocks or wearing a helmet? That's Bama. You can't take him anywhere.
Well, I have thought about wearing goggles, the clear goggles, safety goggles, because that's one thing. I think my skull can take one of the smaller rocks, but maybe an eyeball can't.
I hear you on that. All right. Mark gets the good name. Go ahead, Mark.
All right. Randy, me and Larry can butcher the English language.
You ain't lying.
Deirdre Blaylack ask, have you heard them mimicking owls?
Well, I was talking with Mark yesterday about a recording that I got at the Chickasaw Park. It falls within the spectrogram of being an owl, but the timing and the duration is certainly suspect for me personally. that night that I was having all that stuff happen, I never once heard an owl. But when they were both behind that tree, I was hearing an owl go off like 17 times in a row. And like every 5 seconds, it was, whoo! And I have always told the story where I thought it was them because it sounded like it was getting louder and louder each time, whoo! And then they broke out of the wood line and I never heard it again. So I've always told the story where I thought that was them doing that call, but I can't be for sure. But it sure seems like it was them.
Well,
We've heard similar stuff ourselves.
you know, and I got to thinking about it. If an owl was up there and all of a sudden a predatory animal starts to come through, they could get pretty upset and start putting out a warning call. Okay, I guess we've answered all the questions. One thing that I want to say is, if you think of questions later on, then Randy is going to monitor the comment section. So feel free to ask your question in the comment section, and Randy will answer them there. And
Tell Mid-South Sasquatch that I myself have never smelt any of the stench that has been described by a lot of people. I think it's because I can't say that. Most of the time, I want them to come in because they're curious about me. I don't want them to come in sexually amped up or expecting a bait or anything like that. I don't want them to come in with any kind of demeanor that puts them in any way that will harm me.
yeah.
With that said, I don't know if they'd want to harm me, even if they're curious. They could. But it seems like me a better demeanor for them is just pure curiosity. And I just lay myself open to them, and I am what I am, and I let them be curious about me. I don't want them to be aggressive at all.
Right.
I tell you, I have enjoyed tonight's show so much. Randy has been a mentor for me for years since I first got interested in this. And Randy, we would like to give you this time to say any final comments that you might have.
Well, I always enjoy talking about this. It's something that's on my mind probably daily. Hardly any of the things that have happened to me is not something that I don't think about all the time. So talking about it is like therapy, where you're always looking for somebody who's going to accept what you're saying, and what better arena than this here, where everybody is eager and excited about what you've got to say. So really I always feel pretty good after having a nice session like this, and you guys have certainly made it easy. Your preparation was top notch. Never seen the kind of preparation put into a show the way you guys did. It made it flow much better. So give yourselves a pat on the back, for what you've putting together here.
Well, Mark did all the work. I just showed up, Randy.
Well, that means you look good, brother.
Larry's the eye candy, as Shelley would say.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. Larry, do you have any final comments?
No, sir. I just want to thank Randy for coming on and sharing his experiences, his audio, the video, all that. I know you still got a bunch more that you could talk about and show, and we'll definitely have you back because we love hearing the stories, not even including the stories y'all have had whenever y'all are on your own learning all this stuff. So I enjoyed it, and I know you devise technology like your thermal camera and all that. I mean, there's so much stuff we could talk to you, and unfortunately YouTube cuts us off at 2 hours, so we'll have to have you back on again.
Hey, I'm okay with that.
All right, that sounds great. but thanks for everything.
All right, you're welcome.
Well, I just want to say that it's been a real pleasure talking to Randy this week, on and off the camera. I have learned so much and had so many questions answered. We are big fans, and I'm sure it's just a matter of time before we all share a campfire together. So, thank you again, Randy, for coming on tonight.
My pleasure. I appreciate you guys having me here.
For the heat